Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Daniel had always been the kind of person who was grounded, someone who valued small actions over big speeches. He worked at an engineering company, was respected by his colleagues, and lived a simple, down-to-earth life. He never jumped headfirst into anything, whether it was an investment, a friendship, or a relationship. But when he met Lauren, something inside him flipped upside down. She had a lightness that unsettled him, a way of laughing that seemed to disarm any defenses he had, and a presence that filled the room like everything around her began to revolve around her. From the very first coffee they shared together, he knew his life would never be the same again. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of that. It started with small gestures. Daniel bought chocolates she said she liked, left folded notes in her bag with little messages about how happy he was to have met her. He sent texts during work just to check how her day was going. He learned which salad dressing she preferred, which side of the bed helped her sleep better, and what song made her smile even on tough days. At first, Lauren seemed to reciprocate. She laughed at his jokes, held his hand on their walks, made weekend plans with him. But the pace always came from Daniel. He led everything, extended the invitations, arranged the meetings, planned dinners, surprised her with flowers for no special occasion. If anything worked, it was because he made it work. In just 10 months, Daniel proposed to Lauren. And before anyone thinks it was too fast, it's important to understand the kind of man he was. He didn't make decisions without thinking them through. He had already made mental lists, analyzed strengths and weaknesses, reflected during long walks and quiet nights. To him, proposing marriage was like starting a project with solid ground. And at that moment, Lauren represented everything he believed he was looking for: beauty, intelligence, class, and a delicacy that contrasted with the harshness of the world around him. When she said yes, he felt like someone who had won an emotional marathon. The wedding was exactly how she dreamed it would be. Lauren chose every detail, and Daniel, instead of imposing his preferences, happily went along. He saw in the sparkle in her eyes the confirmation that he was doing everything right. The white dress, the ceremony venue, the flowers, even the flavor of the cake were all her choices. And he, as attentive as ever, simply followed along smiling, happy to be able to give her that moment. During the reception, amid toasts and photos, Daniel had a quiet certainty: he would do anything to see her happy, every single day, for the rest of his life. Life after the wedding was stable. Daniel woke up early, went to work, and came home with dinner already planned in his mind. Sometimes he cooked himself, other times he stopped to buy something he knew she liked. He tried to keep conversations light, asked about her day, suggested a movie they could watch together. This was the kind of care he believed kept a marriage strong, small gestures repeated with love. He paid the bills, maintained the car, organized the finances. Lauren rarely needed to worry about anything practical. And even when she had a rough day, he offered a hug, or just silence in his lap if that's what she needed. But despite being present, Daniel started to feel something was off. He noticed when she looked at her phone and smiled to herself. When he got home, sometimes she was there but seemed distant. She answered "fine" to questions with an automatic tone. She started going out more with friends or used work excuses to not spend as much time together. Daniel tried not to build theories. He looked inside himself for any reason, maybe a flaw. He thought maybe he had stopped doing something important. He started pushing harder, doing even more dinners, more notes, more gestures, as if a marriage was a fire that, at the first sign of fading embers, required more wood. But there was a subtle and growing difference Daniel couldn't ignore anymore. When he spoke to her, her eyes seemed to look past his shoulder. When he talked about his plans, she smiled politely, but without excitement. In some moments, he even felt like she was trying to seem involved, but the effort was artificial. Daniel wasn't stupid. He had a sensitivity shaped by life, by losses he had already experienced and by events that formed his character. He knew something was changing, even if he didn't yet know what. And this, although he tried to push away, hurt silently, like a crack that starts invisible on a wall and slowly grows before the eyes of the one living there. Daniel kept trying. He repeated gestures, insisted on details, pursued presence. But there were moments when he looked at Lauren and wondered if he was still seen as a man, or just as support, a structure holding up what she had, but not sparking emotion anymore. It was a terrible feeling because he still loved her. He loved her in a mature, solid way, based on daily choice rather than impulse. And that might have been the cruelest part of all, loving someone who seemed to no longer feel the same, without having done anything to deserve the distance. But it was still too early for conclusions. And Daniel, even wounded inside, kept believing it might just be a phase. He just didn't know what was coming next. In the following days, Daniel noticed that Lauren was increasingly absorbed in her job. She said she had late meetings, urgent deliveries, corporate dinners. He believed her. Trusted her naturally, like someone who had never been betrayed or even considered the possibility. The truth is, he didn't think of cheating as something that could happen within his own home. He believed in the strength of the connection they had built, even though it was more fragile than he wanted to admit. But behind this corporate routine, there was a constant presence emerging in her conversations: Brandon. A coworker from the marketing department she was apparently working on several projects with. At first, Daniel listened attentively. He thought it was good she had someone she got along with at work. He asked questions, encouraged her, showed interest. Until he started noticing how she changed when talking about him. It was subtle. A bit more sparkle in her eyes, a lighter tone in her voice, a smile escaping the corner of her mouth as if remembering something she preferred to keep to herself. Daniel paid attention to these details because that's how he worked. He observed more than he spoke, listened between the lines. He realized that when she mentioned Brandon, she became animated in a way that hadn't happened in conversations with him in a while. Then he began putting together pieces that alone seemed harmless but together created an uncomfortable picture. Lauren started dressing more carefully for work, choosing clothes with more thought, spending more time in front of the mirror like in the days of their courtship. She said it was just for self-esteem, that she wanted to feel good. And Daniel believed it. He wanted to believe. One night, after a peaceful dinner, Daniel casually asked about Brandon. He just wanted to understand who he was. He asked neutrally, without provocation. Lauren responded normally, saying he was smart, creative, someone with great ideas. Then she laughed at something he had said earlier that day. A free, almost intimate laugh. Daniel stayed silent for a few seconds, trying to figure out if he was exaggerating or if, indeed, he was witnessing the beginning of an emotional drift. He didn't say anything then, but the memory of that laugh followed him for days. He felt like he had lost something without knowing when or how. The connection that once belonged only to them now seemed to be shared with another man. Without confrontation, Daniel began paying closer attention to schedules. To excuses. To days when she said she was exhausted but spent too much time responding to messages on her phone with a discreet smile on her lips. And even without concrete proof, he felt pushed out of his own marriage, not as an intruder, but as someone who had become invisible in his own story. When he suggested dinners or couple activities, she always seemed busy, tired, or caught up in work. And when he told her he missed being close, she would respond with a kiss on the forehead or say, "We really need to make time," but it never happened. He watched his efforts turn into vague promises. Until one Friday, he decided to leave work early. He had gotten a small promotion, the result of months of dedication, and wanted to celebrate. He bought Lauren's favorite wine, picked up dessert from the restaurant they used to frequent, and went straight home. He didn't tell her. He wanted to surprise her. When he arrived, he left the things in the kitchen and went to the bedroom, where she usually did video calls when working from home. The door was slightly open. He heard voices. He paused. Recognized Olivia's voice, Lauren's best friend. He thought about walking in, but something made him wait. What he heard next changed everything. Lauren was speaking softly but clearly. She said she felt suffocated. That Daniel was too good, but the relationship felt more like an obligation than a desire. She said she had the feeling she had chosen the safest path and sometimes wondered what it would have been like if she had waited longer. He was last in line, Liv. I was tired of things going wrong, and he showed up with everything ready, perfectly put together. But was that really what I wanted? The question hung in the air. Daniel felt his body freeze. Her words hit him like they were directed straight at him. He stood frozen, staring at the door as if facing a chasm. He heard Olivia try to soften those words, telling her it might just be a phase, that she should talk to him. But Lauren didn't show regret, only doubt. Only uncertainty. As if she had woken up too late to realize she may have married someone she never truly loved. Daniel walked away from the door quietly. He sat on the couch, looked at the wine he had bought, and stayed there for minutes that felt like hours. No tears, no yelling, no sudden movements. It felt like suddenly everything made sense. All the little absences, empty gazes, lack of initiative, cold words. They were all connected to a truth he had refused to see: the love he gave so diligently wasn't returned the same way. Not because of her lack of effort, but because maybe it had never existed the way he imagined. Later, when Lauren came downstairs, she found Daniel calm. He didn't bring up the topic. They talked as if nothing had happened. She commented on work, and he pretended to listen. She thanked him for the wine, and he just smiled. Inside him, the hardest decision of his life had already begun forming. The next morning, Daniel woke up before Lauren. He lay in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, breathing deeply, letting his thoughts organize. There were no more doubts inside him. No dramatic scenes, no outbursts. It was a decision that had been forming for a long time, but until then he still had hope. Now he didn't. What remained was clarity. He got out of bed, went to the office, and opened a folder where he kept documents. He pulled out a draft of a separation agreement he had prepared weeks ago, in a moment when he already suspected this marriage was barely holding on. He calmly added a few more points, checked dates and data, and printed 2 copies. He signed his copy firmly. Then he went back to the kitchen and made coffee for both of them, like he did every day. Lauren came down a few minutes later, still with a sleepy expression. She said good morning, sat down, and thanked him for the coffee. Daniel watched carefully, like someone looking at a photo for the last time before putting it away. When he finished his coffee, he asked to talk. Lauren raised her eyes, surprised. He rarely asked for a serious conversation. He was the type who preferred showing feelings through actions. But in that moment, his voice was calm and direct. He started by saying he had heard her conversation with Olivia. He saw the shock on her face. She set her cup down on the table, stayed silent for a few seconds, and asked which part he had heard. Daniel answered honestly. He repeated the exact words that marked him as her backup option. Lauren tensed, tried to justify, said she was just venting, that not everything you say to a friend reflects what you truly feel. Daniel listened carefully. He didn't interrupt. He let her speak, let her try to erase the words spoken the day before as if they were dust thrown into the wind. When she finished, he simply said he understood. That, as painful as it was, he understood her feelings weren't the same as his. And that nobody can be forced to stay in a place where the will to remain no longer exists. It was at this moment that he slid the envelope across the table. Lauren looked confused. She opened it slowly. She read the title of the document and let out a nervous laugh. She said he was overreacting. That it was just a crisis. But he remained silent, looking at her firmly. Without anger. Without accusation. Just with the gaze of someone who had already said goodbye internally a long time ago. She began arguing. She said he was being cold. That he could at least try to talk more, get closer. She threw onto the table that he was too methodical, too predictable, and that maybe that was what had distanced her without him realizing. She tried to flip the situation, as if he was responsible for the distance. But Daniel had already prepared himself to hear that. He listened like watching a movie repeat itself. He knew that script. And he was tired of pretending things would improve just because someone says, "We can try again." They had already tried. He had tried, for months. And she knew that. She just didn't want to admit it. Lauren started getting upset. She tore the paper with her hands, saying that wasn't how things were resolved. That he couldn't just hand her a document and walk out of her life like they were just contractual co-workers. Daniel didn't react. He stood up from the table, went to retrieve a second copy he had kept hidden. He calmly placed it on the table. He said this wasn't an impulsive breakup, but the result of everything they had been through for a long time. That he preferred to leave while he still respected everything they lived through, rather than staying there pretending it was still a marriage. He said true love doesn't survive in a place where only one person is fully present. Her reaction was disbelief. She never imagined Daniel would be the one making this decision. She thought he would always give in, always insist, always wait for a chance. But the man in front of her was different. He was someone who, after everything, had learned to choose himself. Lauren lost her footing. She tried to appeal to the past, reminded him of the wedding ceremony, the vows, the first few months. But all of that was behind them now. Daniel said he remembered all of it too, but remembering wasn't enough. That living half-love was the same as living a disguised emptiness. And he refused to live like that anymore. Lauren fell silent. She stared at the paper a second time. This time, she didn't tear it. She just left it there, unsure of what to do with it. Daniel collected the envelope, put the papers back, and went to the bedroom. Within minutes, he packed some clothes into a small suitcase. It wasn't an escape. It was a dignified exit. He came downstairs, saw Lauren standing in the kitchen, motionless. He said he'd come back later to pick up the rest of his things. She didn't respond. She just stood there, frozen, as if finally understanding that words spoken impulsively in a conversation with a friend could have real, permanent consequences. Daniel walked out the front door with firm steps. The same man who once entered that relationship with a heart full of dreams was now leaving with a heart broken, but at peace. The pain was still there, but something stronger emerged, the certainty that he did the right thing. That, no matter how much he still loved her, he couldn't keep trying alone. That love, no matter how pure, needs to be returned. That you can't build a life on blind hope. And in that moment, he carried no bitterness. He carried freedom. Daniel spent the first few days away from home in silence, not giving many explanations to his closest friends. He rented a small furnished apartment in a quiet neighborhood, where he could reorganize his thoughts without needing to justify his choice to anyone. He avoided social media. He wanted distance from anything that might bring immediate memories. There was no obvious sadness, just a silent mourning, a slow digestion of the end of an entire chapter. He used his alone time to do things he had neglected. He started running in the mornings, enrolled in an advanced finance course, and accepted an invitation to give lectures at his company. Slowly, life found a new rhythm. One night, unplanned, he sat in front of the computer and decided to write everything down. Not to accuse, not to assign blame, but to relieve the weight in his chest. He detailed the process of loving someone who saw him as a safe option. How painful it was to be chosen out of convenience. How a marriage could seem solid on the outside and fragile on the inside. When he finished the text, he felt he couldn't just keep it to himself. He needed to share it. He created an anonymous account on a Life Stories forum and posted it there, like releasing a secret into the sea. He went to sleep without imagining what was about to happen. The next day, upon waking up, he found dozens of notifications. The story had spread. People commented, shared, related. Many men said they had gone through similar situations. Women wrote that they had never considered how their words could affect someone who loves them silently. The text went viral. And with it, without Daniel planning it, Lauren's image started to fade. Friends in common called him. Colleagues from her old office talked among themselves. The story spread faster than any malicious rumor. And this time, everything was true. For the first time, his version was heard without filters, without interruptions, without someone else twisting the narrative. Lauren found out a few days later. She was contacted by co-workers and, when she read the text, she knew it was about her. There were no names, but everything was there. The wedding party, the notes, the dinners, the conversation with Olivia. She tried denying it to herself. Said he exaggerated, that it was just an immature rant. But it didn't take long before she felt the effects. The work environment became awkward. Co-workers started avoiding her. A project she was supposed to lead was reassigned to someone else. And within days, her contract was terminated. The official justification was budget cuts, but she knew. People whispered. Glances were loaded with judgment. Without a job and without the financial stability Daniel had provided for so long, Lauren saw her bills pile up. She lost the rented apartment, had to sell personal items, and eventually moved back in with her parents. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the start of discomfort with her own image. For the first time, she had to deal with what she had done without the shield of pride. In a short time, everyone who once admired her elegance and poise now looked at her with suspicion. And this affected her in a way no argument ever had before. Meanwhile, Daniel continued living, growing, rebuilding. The text he posted became an involuntary manifesto about unbalanced relationships. He was invited for interviews but turned most down. He didn't want fame, he just wanted to move forward. And he did. He bought a new car, redecorated the apartment, and took a small trip to the countryside to visit an aunt he hadn't seen in years. He spent an entire afternoon listening to old stories and, for the first time, openly talked about what he had been through. His aunt simply hugged him. She said love needs to be a two-way street. And sometimes, loving someone too much can hide how much we stop loving ourselves. Without forcing encounters or seeking new beginnings, Daniel met someone at a lecture he gave at a friend's company. Her name was Megan. Different from Lauren in every way. She was spontaneous, fun, intense in just the right measure. She didn't rush to define anything, but from the start, she showed interest, reciprocity, ease. They started seeing each other often. Simple outings, long conversations. And the most surprising part, Daniel didn't have to try hard to be seen. Megan looked at him with admiration without him needing to prove anything. Silence between them was comfortable, not tense. The connection grew without pressure, without suffocating expectations, simply because it felt good to be together. Over time, they became inseparable. Daniel started smiling genuinely again. Started sleeping well. Felt at peace. Sometimes he thought of Lauren, but without resentment. Just with the strange feeling of having survived a life that once felt like his, but now he viewed with distance. Megan knew his story and respected his space. Never judged him, never asked unnecessary questions. Just welcomed him as he was. And that's how Daniel discovered that love doesn't have to be a battle. That when two people truly choose each other, everything flows naturally. Lauren kept trying to rebuild her life. She landed a temporary job, but emotional instability prevented her from putting down roots. She tried dating others, but no relationship lasted. The shadow of what she had lost followed her silently. One time, she ran into Daniel by accident at a cafe. He was with Megan. He saw her, smiled politely, and continued talking with his new partner as if nothing had interrupted them. Lauren froze inside. Not because she still loved him, but because she realized that, unlike her, he had healed. She left the cafe in silence. Got into her car and sat for a few minutes, staring at the steering wheel. A part of her still believed she would have time to recover what she had lost. But that brief encounter made it clear that time had moved on for Daniel. And some opportunities, once wasted, don't return. He held no grudge. And precisely because of that, there was no space left for her in his life. That night, as Daniel closed the door to his home, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: tranquility. He knew he had gone through something deep, painful, transformative. But now, with Megan by his side, with a new routine, with a whole heart again, he could confidently say that everything had a purpose. Not everyone who says yes truly wants to walk with you. Some just choose you because they were tired of failing with others. But real love begins when you learn to love yourself enough to not accept being someone's consolation prize. And of all the lessons he learned, that was the greatest one. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.